I'm John Donnelly, and on behalf of the Earth Care Committee of this church, we welcome you to this candidate forum sponsored by the Sonoma Valley Climate Coalition. In March of 2017, our Earth Care Committee helped co-found the Sonoma Valley Climate Coalition, and we have hosted its monthly meetings here on the fourth Thursday of every month. A few years ago, our committee invited church members and others in the community to join our Earth Care advocates so that we can advocate and lobby for climate action measures at the local, our city, at the state level in Sacramento, and at the national level. We have about 80 people, and you're welcome to join us. There's information about them on the Earth Care table back there. 3 years ago, we were the first church in Sonoma Valley to go solar. So tonight's program, lighting and sound system, is powered by 48 solar panels over your head and the roof up there. Last year, our church was honored to be recognized as the Creation Justice Church, the seventh United Church of Christ in the country to be so designated. At the same time, our National United Church of Christ entered into a partnership with 350.org, the leading world climate activist organization, as you know, so that we could ramp up our collective voices for climate change, for climate action. And it comes close to home because Madoline, who is the executive director of 350.org, grew up in Sonoma and has come here several times to speak with us. Finally, if you're looking for a little hope and inspiration in these troubled times, we invite you to come back in the daytime and visit our new monarch butterfly garden at the back of the church sanctuary. It's located there, and the garden was a collaborative project with the Vallejo State Park and the Sonoma Valley Garden Club. So come and look at the butterflies and the bees in the pollinator garden. Our program is rather lengthy tonight, and so some of you might be interested in that we also have indoor restrooms. So the men's restroom is over here on this side. The women's restroom is through the interior doors to the right, and the foyer up there. So now it's my honor and most gratefulness to turn this over to Jen Palladini, the chair of our Sonoma Valley Climate Coalition. So thanks again for coming.
Good evening, and welcome to the City Council Candidates Forum on Climate. My name is Jen Palladini. I'm a member of the Sonoma Valley Climate Coalition, a coalition of individuals and groups committed to advancing climate change solutions in Sonoma Valley and beyond. Our coalition came together out of a realization that in order to address the immense and growing challenge of climate change, we must organize and act collectively in our own communities. We meet the fourth Thursday of every month in this room at 7 o'clock, so everybody here is now at their very first Sonoma Valley Climate Coalition meeting, and we hope to see you next month here as well. Cities produce approximately 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore they're an integral part of the solution. While the city of Sonoma clearly cannot address the threat of climate change single-handedly, we feel that the immensity of the problem necessitates doing everything we can to be a part of the solution. The UN Secretary General recently stated that climate change is the defining issue of our time, and we are at a defining moment. Scientists have been telling us for decades, over and over again, far too many leaders have refused to listen. The goal of this forum is to learn more about our City Council candidates' positions on key climate-related issues. Our coalition members have developed a series of 4 questions that will be asked this evening. We have 3 additional questions that we hoped to ask, but due to time constraints, we'll be unable. You can read their responses to those questions on waste reduction, pedestrian and bicycle safety, and affordable housing at our website, sonomaclimate.com. We know that some of you may have additional questions related to climate and environmental issues. We invite you to write those on cards in the back, on the table on the left side of the room before you leave tonight, and we can transcribe those and get those known to candidates as well after the forum. Tonight, questions will be asked by 4 different coalition members, including myself. Each candidate will have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to respond. In the interest of time, we ask that you hold your applause or response until the end of the forum. With that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the candidates. So I have over here Logan Harvey. You can applaud now. Jack Ding. Petlock, Madeline Agramonte, Rachel Hunley, Jack Wagner, and James Cribb. All right, with that, I'll go ahead and address the first question. We have a predetermined order of responding that was determined randomly before the forum tonight. So the first question and the first to respond is Chris Petlock. And the first question is, Sonoma has set aspirational goals to address climate change. A goal was set in 2005 to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 25% by 2015, and yet our emissions since 2010 have actually increased. What would be your priority if elected or re-elected to reverse this trend in rising greenhouse gas emissions?
Great, thank you, Jen. Thanks for putting this together. I served on the City Services and Environment Commission for 9 years, and many of those years I chaired that commission. We did a lot of work on climate action as part of that commission, including quite a few years working on Climate Action 2020. And then eventually, as that was challenged by the River Watch group, we advocated that the city actually implement all the measures within that climate action plan, even though it was being challenged. If I was elected, I would make it a number one priority to have the city do a greenhouse gas inventory so we can assess where the low-hanging fruit is for the city of Sonoma. It's currently something we're doing at the Valley of the Moon Water District. I think an action like that will make it easy to decide which goals, which things we should go after first. After that, I think the city should put as many incentives in place as possible so that residences are putting in solar so that they can become carbon neutral as much as possible. And then I think beyond that, we should be encouraging people to use bicycles as much as possible, doing whatever we can for traffic calming measures so that people feel safe to ride their bikes in Sonoma, as well as our kids. I think, when I drop my kids off at school in the morning, I see, just these long lines of cars idling. And I remember when I was a kid, it was pretty common that we either walked or rode our bikes to school. So I would love to see that come back to our communities again and do whatever we can as a community to make it safe for our kids to ride their bicycles to school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Madeline Agramonte, this year's mayor of the city of Sonoma. It's interesting you use the word aspirational because, actually, I sit on the Sonoma County Waste Management Agency, and they have put forward a model ordinance for zero waste in all of the county, and those were the words that they used. And the reason they used aspirational is because it's huge. That the zero waste plan is very big, so we've asked for benchmarks, and that's something that I find really, really exciting, and I'm very happy to move forward. It's kind of interesting the things that we've done here in Sonoma since Climate Action 2020. In 2016, I think we've done some wonderful things. We've passed 22 elements. Many people here know about those. And of course, traffic calming, slowing traffic down. I'm looking for some type of strips, not the speed bumps, because those are lawsuit approval, and improved bicycle access. I wanted to let you know that the city of Sonoma actually has the bronze award from the bicycle-friendly community, but now I find it's at the bottom of the rung. Thank you, Mr. Metzler, that we realize that now. And actually, the CSEC has come up with their own information, which I'm very excited about. And that's something for us to follow, so I appreciate that. This is from the CSEC. And the other thing, of course, I've spoken to the chief of police, and I think we need some traffic control here in Sonoma to do some of that calming. And of course, my biggest issue is a shuttle for the city of Sonoma and our valley. And what I do have here are the plans for the city of Sebastopol, and they are going to get the first electrical shuttle in their city that they're building right now. And you know, I think we need our fair share, and I'd like to do that for us as well. With respect to some of the elements of the 22 approvals, you know, we have no idling for our tourist buses. We are looking for parking lots. I am looking for parking lots, and I would like a city council subcommittee actually to take a look at the Casa Grande, because we've left that up to the staff and it's not working so right now. But those are some of the things that we have really moved forward, and I'm so proud that we are actually ahead of other cities with the 22 elements that we've approved. We have a lot more to do, but I'm very happy that we've moved forward on it. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for letting us come here to express our opinions for the most important issue in our country, in our city, and across the bay all over the country. I am Commissioner for Sonoma Valley Citizen Advisory Commission. Has been working over there 5.5 years. When we review any big project, we always review its potential influence. One of the most important things is environment. It's the greenhouse gas emission, and the traffic, and the parking, and also waste treatment, because the waste is an overlooked the factor to affect the environment. We fully support those kind of projects. They're using green technologies and concerned neighbors, and also we help them identify any hidden issues. For example, 5 years and 10 years later, what kind of situation it is. We always ask them to numerous environmental impact reports. I think if you do a couple of more times, maybe not enough, back and forth, project will become the better and the better. I read this in the questions, the 25% emission increased by the year of 2015. That is the difference from the numbers I heard. And I just got the information. In California, we have reduced 13% carbon emission during the past 5 years. At the same time, we got 26% increase for our GDPs. So I'm not sure, and this number is just for, because our Sonoma here should be above the average. Again, if not enough, and we should go back, look at our project is achievable and realistic. We can make an adjustment. Thank you so much.
First, I want to thank the Sonoma Valley Climate Coalition for having us all here and all of you for showing up. On this topic, for me, this is like a marvelous twofer, because I think one of the best ways that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions in this community is by building more housing for people who work here. So if, we're 2.7 square miles, if people were not commuting 20, 30 miles to come to work, we'd be saving a tremendous amount of energy, and people could be able to walk to work, bike to work. So, I think everyone acknowledges that housing, particularly housing for our workforce, is an important issue. So I think addressing that issue will actually have the greatest impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I think it's, from all the data I've seen, obviously the largest contributor to that is on-road traffic. So, the second highest thing is, the energy from buildings. And, actually in that respect, I think the city has done a fair number of things already to move things forward in that. You know, taking the Calgary plus the Tier 1 requirements for building. They've put the solar panels on the police station. They've replaced the street lights with LEDs. Those things have all made significant contributions. But if we're going to really reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we need to cut down on the amount of vehicle miles traveled in this community. And I think if we really looked at it, one of those day in, day out, the largest things we're going to see is that it's the people who have to commute long distances to work here. And so I'm a big proponent of workforce housing. I've talked a lot about what we could do if we set up, use the Roth bill to create a workforce housing opportunity zone on an already identified housing site, like the Safeway, and put housing there where people, the day-to-day in and out trips that most people do would become walking trips or bike trips. And I think that's really where we need to focus our energy, is on providing housing as a way to reduce vehicle miles traveled in the community. Thank you.
Well, first I want to claim my carbon credits for walking here this evening. I think the saying that there's only so much we can do locally is true. It's actually a good thing, because that means we should be able to do everything we can do pretty easily. I serve on the Community Services and Environmental Commission currently. And yeah, our emissions have gone up 9% since 1990. And when I first moved back, I advocated for Sonoma Clean Power. So we've actually reduced our building emissions, or building contributions to greenhouse gases, by a third since then. So we've got that taken care of. Like, we need to just keep moving forward on that. What is taking all of those gains away is traffic. Traffic is the issue. That's our biggest contribution to greenhouse gases. Whether or not you count in all the miles traveled from tourism, it's still people driving. And so we need, the first time I ran on a public transit system, and I'm glad that most of the candidates up here are backing that. So I think that's actually a very possible thing, especially if the TOT increase passes. So yes on S, I believe, is the measure. I haven't heard anyone advertising this, but that is our local measure to increase the TOT. And bikes. We have the green lanes everywhere. Again, making it bike friendly to be here, making it accessible to walk here. We have so much time tonight. This is crazy. I know. But it's, thoughtful pauses are good too. And so, I mean, that's it. We want more EV, we want to encourage EVs, we need some parking spots somewhere downtown, more solar, and then, beyond that, there are these global changes that need to be made. I didn't write the responses to the question. So yeah, zero waste goal, I'm down. Zero landfill goal, I'm down. I think there's technology to do that. UGB, I would say renew it. I believe there are natural boundaries to the city on the Sonoma Creek and what the Agua Caliente Creek and the Mayacamas mountain range. That's kind of the limits. I would love to see the springs incorporate. But as far as building houses out to the green zone, or the green belt, which is in the southern eastern part of the city, I'm not really keen on that. Maybe we can find some spots, but housing is a big thing, so we can make it affordable. And I will see you guys in a second.
All right. So I'm Logan Harvey. I'm running for City Council, as you may have guessed. I'd like to thank the Earth Care Committee and the Climate Coalition for inviting us to their space to host this event. They did an excellent job of providing us questions in this space for us. I've been endorsed by Sierra Club, and I'm very happy to have their endorsement, as well as the Sonoma Democratic Party. And so in answer to this question, I think it's really important to point out that a recent study done by the Center for Climate Protection, done in 2016, noticed that 70% of our emissions come from transportation. And this is a really, really key thing. In Sonoma, I've worked at one of our local wineries, and I've talked to many people in town, and many of our workforce are driving in from other cities to work here. So this as they come into work in our wineries, in our hotels, in our restaurants, and everywhere, they spew kind of greenhouse gas emissions the entire way. And so the most important thing for us to do is reduce those emissions. So my plan is to develop an affordable housing trust fund so that the city can become a partner with developers so that we can lower the cost of housing in town, to increase density so that we can lower the cost just kind of by design. And by building that density and working with regional partners, I believe that there's a potential that we can start to develop a regional transit program as well. The county's already working on this. We have Santa Rosa's committing to increasing housing there. Every kind of community here is starting to increase housing. And when we start to talk to regional partners, there is this kind of push to create a transit program that works within the county. If we can get workers here that they can walk or bike to work, that's a great solution for our personal workers, but also there's going to be people that transit between the county. I think it's also important that we can try to find ways, especially if we're committing city money, to focus or prioritize workers that work in the community for these affordable housing projects. I think that we need to focus not only on low-income housing, but also middle-income housing, trying to build deed-restricted homes for teachers, firefighters, cops, that make too much money to get into the low-income housing, but not enough to afford the market rate. Beyond that, I think it would be a really good idea for the city to create kind of pre-permitting or quicker permitting for solar on people's roofs, to increase bike lanes and safe transits to schools, so people will be encouraged to do that, and continue to promote our kind of greenhouse gas reductions by taking steps within the city to show that we're doing it as well. So, okay.
Again, my name is Rachel Hunley, and I have the honor of being endorsed by both the Sierra Club and the Sonoma County Democratic Party. The last 4 years, I feel we've been steadily gaining momentum, although probably very slowly. Over the last 4 years, we've taken steps like voluntarily adopting measures from Climate Action 2020, switching out over 1,000 streetlights to energy efficient LED, and then we switched all of our city energy accounts to 100% renewable evergreen, which that highlighted one of the strengths we have as a small city. Sometimes problems seem more challenging for us to address, but I feel like as far as environmental measures go, that being small comes with an advantage. Like Evergreen, for example, I think at the time it was a $17,000 a year increase, but it was obviously worth it. It was easy for us to adjust the budget and take that step. We've also been focusing more on our stream of waste, most recently with banning straws and single-use plastics from special events on the plaza. And even, you might have noticed a couple years ago, a water bottle refilling water fountain pop up on the plaza, which was one of my first little projects, although the placement was a little bit challenging. The kids like to fill it with sand, but I hear that we are going to be adding more of those. And another stuff that's done recently is we've been reorganizing how we deal with special events. Well, the relevance is that it's opening up more time for the Community Service Environment Commission so that they can actually focus on environmental issues rather than just talking about special events all the time. And this year we've moved towards a system where they get to create a whole annual work plan of different projects that they can focus on. And I think this is one of the strengths the city has of having a commission specifically geared towards environmental issues, because they can spend a lot of time thinking about it and bring it to the council and can consider things we might otherwise consider. It's a fast wins in 30 seconds. But my other big priority is housing. We're going to talk about transportation next, but housing is one of these issues that transcends all interests, the economy, the environment, and also social justice. And we're at a point where we have to find a solution. And as far as our greenhouse gas emissions goals, if our employees are driving further and further to get to work, then we're never going to achieve our goals. So I am addressing housing more than the next topic.
Good evening, everyone. David Leland. I'll be reading the second question. Transportation accounts for the majority of greenhouse gas emissions in our county. What city-level measures do you think are most realistic and achievable ways to reduce Sonoma's share of these emissions? Consider in your response solutions geared towards employees, local residents and local businesses, and visitors to our community.
Thank you so much, Mr. Leland. The question is transportation accounts for major GHG emissions in our country. Yes, that is true. When I'm working with the advisory commission, I strongly feel it's easy for us to set some numbers, for example, how many events allowed, how many people allowed for each events. We strictly screened and for sure your facilities and traffic is okay, and then we suggest to approve. But however, the PRMD, they received these kind of projects and proposals, but I don't think they really carried it out. Basically, they say no any audit systems. Nobody knows. So now I would like to appreciate the efforts made by the Moon of the Valley Alliance. Kathy Pong, she impressed me a lot. She did a lot of really detailed work. Check out, follow up, how many events you got approved, how many people coming in, back and forth, because a lot of the factors, if out of the control, scientifically, it's hard to set up new rules, new regulations. So another thing I want to mention is we should reduce our reliance on the automobiles. In the city on the limit, we can improve and the bicycle, the trail, and Harvey already mentioned for the young people. And also, I want to say, not only for the bicycle, we have a lot of the senior people and the kids. Maybe we were thinking about tricycle. And also, we want to provide free the service for the shuttle bus. Why I say the free? Because recently, I reviewed the special Springs project in our advisory commission. City on the county level want to invest, improve Springs public transportation. So now I suggest we have the free the shuttle station bus service between the downtown and the Spring Fairmont Hotel. Thank you so much.
So I guess my goal with the first 2.5 minutes was to get through most all these questions so I can kind of get deeper into the subject, which is awesome why we have a single subject open forum here. So I'm endorsed by the Green Party of Sonoma County. I'll throw that in. I got involved with the Green Party of Sonoma County when I moved back here in 2012 because they were working on Sonoma Clean Power. And they were willing to work with me on public banking, which in the big picture is another element of how we can fund a lot of these projects that we need to do. A little bit more of my experience, I was a street fundraiser for Greenpeace for a month, which is, if you talk to anyone about a year, it's incredibly difficult. I was an organic farmer as well for a number of years. And like I said, I ran on public transit the first time. I think that's something that, again, we all agree on up here. I'm like way ahead of myself. I was just going to talk about local stuff here. So we're talking about how we achieve these goals. Obviously, there's only so much we can do locally. The main concept we have to do if we're going to deal with tourism, if we're going to deal with traffic and housing, in addition to those local things, that we have to have this idea of detaching economic growth from environmental destruction, from fossil fuels, from wealth inequality, because economic growth is not bad. It's good to have a nicer house. It's good to have this microphone. If you break it down to those parts, it's not worth as much as this microphone. It doesn't do the things we like to do. But in the current system, all of these activities add to greenhouse gas emissions. And so, again, locally, we need to focus on that. When we're on the dais in the city council and we're trying to work with staff, we need to focus
work together, have this priority, say we want local transit, whether that's a local route, whether that's a valley route, whether that's, you know, Four Corners to the plaza to Agua Caliente and back. We need to make steps on that. We need to be able to communicate together on that dais as city councilors, as a majority, hopefully, if we can get a progressive majority this election, and make those changes. And then, again, keep pressuring our other representatives as citizens, as councilors, as a council if we need to get our state representatives, our federal representatives to keep moving forward with what they can do, because we are reliant on them too. So I'll end forward.
Before I moved to California 6 years ago, I had the joy of living in a city where you actually didn't even need a car because the public transportation was so amazing. And when my dad kindly gave me his 2001 Toyota Sienna minivan so I could drive out here when I moved here, you know, I just realized how different of a lifestyle it is where you are used to using your car for everything. And I think about this a lot. We have, you know, parking on the plazas become a challenging issue, but part of it is a lot of people are still stuck with just driving a car by themselves. So in some ways, I think collectively we're going to have to go through a culture shift of letting go of the convenience that having our own cars has brought to us and thinking more about how we can build our lives in a way that reduces our reliance on having to do that. As far as realistic and achievable goals, when it comes to employees, housing is highest on the list. We're already seeing people driving in from Solano and Monarch Park, and it's going to be getting even further. We already have a hotel in the valley that is busing in workers from Sacramento. And this issue is not going to change until the city actually gets serious and makes housing a priority. And it's a challenging problem. Yes, a lot of cities around the Bay Area are facing it also, but it's only going to be the cities that can adapt that are going to be successful in the long term. As far as residents, I think that there's some ways that we can start to get people used to taking shuttles and public transportation, focusing on things like, you know, major events, Tuesday night markets, having some sort of circulating shuttle that people will actually use. Because up until now, our public transportation schedules, they just haven't really intersected with a realistic use from the community. So I think starting with something small and realistic, it just gets people in the mind of, oh, I can actually take a shuttle and I don't have to drive home, so I can have another glass of wine. As far as businesses, this relates to the bigger issue of, which is also going to be in our next question, of diversifying our economy. And I think that there are some modern things we can do, like thinking about having our own municipal broadband, where we can actually expand our economic opportunity with things that don't require people for traveling. And visitors are also going to be covered in the next question.
It's very appropriate for David Leland to ask this question. He was the one that talked me into our Chevy Volt, which is powered by solar and evergreen on our house. So thank you for all that, David. You freed our family from gas. Pretty nice. And I think that we should do that and encourage more people in our community to do just that. You know, go ahead and get an electric car, put solar on the roof if they can. And then planning going forward, just making sure that the houses that we have in our community are either have solar on them or are solar ready. For employees and so on, and businesses coming into the community, make sure that as part of the planning and use permit of those businesses, that there is a plan in place for employees to either live locally or to use mass transit, or to have showers on site, so they're encouraged to bike into and out of work. For visitors, for all the years I served on the CSEC, we worked very hard with event planners to make sure that there was bike valet at events, and that they promoted those events to have people arrive and leave by bicycle or other modes of transportation. And we were fairly successful with that. I think the more that we marketed that and encouraged event planners to do that, the more that happened. I think the same can be done at the local hotel level if we're really marketing marketing the valley as a bicycle-friendly place. Well, those are the kind of tourists that I'd like to see around here myself, but also, having the hotels encourage their guests to cycle around the valley. It's fairly flat here, so I think we can really sell it that way. I agree all we can do to make sure that emissions are kept low. It also reduces our own congestion for us that are trying to go about our business here in the valley. Thank you.
Well, I think I addressed in the first question the issue of employees and business in terms of building the housing here. And I've been on the planning commission for the past 5 years, and I want to give just like a little ray of hope. Maybe it's somebody who thinks, when are we going to have some housing? We did in the past year approve over 100 units of housing. 48 of those, the Saha project on Broadway, which will be available to very low and low income and veterans. And then the Olivia Apartments is going to be 60 one and two bedroom apartments, which will then have some inclusion of the usual 20% inclusionary units behind the Sonoma market. So there is going to be finally some stuff popping up out of the ground that will help our workforce. We certainly need to work harder and do more and do it quicker. Vis-a-vis the visitors to the valley, I think we could almost take the lead from what the wine industry here is doing, since they're kind of probably the major magnet for visitors to this community. And they set their sustainability goal for making Sonoma be the first all-sustainable wine region. And in their latest report from 2017, they're pretty far along the way in doing that. About 70, I think, third-party certified 72% of the winery or vineyards and wineries in Sonoma County are sustainable. And most of those, over 80%, are family-owned and operated and are multi-generational. And I think if we kind of took that same notion and said, well, let's talk about a whole sustainable vacation visitor culture. If we put Ford Go bikes or jump bikes on the plaza and encourage wineries to have them stations, and at the shopping centers, it was mentioned before, pretty flat area here, but even with the jump bikes, they're electric bikes, so even some of us are getting too old to go up those hills. We could use the electric bikes as well. So I think sort of refocusing our advertising efforts and our focus about making this a more pedestrian, bicycle-friendly community, we can use that for our advantage also with our visitors.
Thank you. Well, it's kind of interesting. I want us all to get nostalgic now. What about the leaf blowers? They're gone. There's one person I'm after, though, where the park point is. I think he goes at 4:30 in the morning and blows the heck out of that whole parking lot. I'm going to find him and get a hold of him so he'll stop using the gas leaf blower. So one of the things I heard that we are fortunate because of our small city, and I agree, there are some good things that happen because of our size, but here are the bad things that happen. Number one, I have been arguing and fighting about transportation hubs for Sonoma and for the city. But our problem is we're too small to get any type of tax incentives. Like, for example, the new units on Broadway, they're 48 units. If they have a bus stop, why can't we get an incentive for that being a transportation hub? We will not, because it's too small. And I don't think that's fair. The other thing is I sit on the Sonoma County Transportation Authority, and what we have found out is that people in Sonoma travel further than people from any other city. Now, why might that be? We're nicer than everybody, but that's not the reason. The reason is we have no local transportation and we have no regional transportation. So that's one of the reasons why I'm really working very hard to get us a shuttle with respect to hopefully an electrical vehicle similar to Sebastopol. Now that will help employees, local residents, and our visitors. The other thing, of course, I believe in is that we need to be able to find private funders, of which I have, who's very interested in helping to fund the shuttle system, because he believes that it's time for us to be able to do that. It's interesting, you know, being on the Transportation Authority, we hear an awful lot about the issues of transportation. But one of the great things is we really want to look at parking. You know, you see the shuttles from the hotels. We actually could have our own shuttles. We could actually be able to get people off the street so they don't have to run the vans from all the hotels, and possibly we could give them, no, they actually could pay us for our shuttle, and we could run people through all the hotels in the valley. So I think transportation is one of my best subjects, and I'm glad this question was asked. Thank you.
All right. So I also have the joy of living in a country really where transportation is not much of an issue. I lived in South Korea for 3.5 years, and I lived very far south, about 4 hours away from Seoul. There was a bus that left from my community to Seoul. It left about every 15 minutes. It cost $20 to get there. And then you had a Seoul Underground Railway system that worked beautifully. Sonoma is a very different place, right? And the biggest challenges that kind of face our community when it comes to public transportation is the fact that we're so rural. How do you design a public transportation system that would take somebody from Sonoma to Kenwood Winery in an adequate way? Once you've got them in front of Kenwood Winery, they'd still have to walk about a half mile to get to their place of business. This is kind of difficult. The other problems that we face here is the ability to make a program that's sustainable. We have problems with ridership. I think it was already mentioned that we're not accustomed to getting on public transportation and things like that. The future of transportation in this area is miniaturized, it's electric, and it's probably going to have some amount of automation. There's already a city in the United States that's trying this out. Austin, Texas is rolling out a pilot program to run small electric buses that hold about 12 people, completely automated, and drive them around their cities. This is a great way to kind of have quiet, easygoing transit from high-populated areas to other high-populated areas, move people around the city. And if you're not having a huge bus that comes through your neighborhood, you might be a little bit more interested in having a small transportation system that comes nearer to your house, right? So I think that that's something that we need to look at. There's a lot of new programs that are coming online. They're not completely there yet, but 5 years down the road, we need to start having that conversation now. Housing is obviously a major issue for us, and we need to recognize that we're in a regional housing crisis as well. The 100-unit project that was built in Boise Hot Springs recently had 500 applicants to it. This is because Vallejo, Oakland, San Francisco, Napa, all of our surrounding areas are all struggling with their housing problems as well. So while we need to build more housing and more density so that we can support a regional transit program, we also need to make sure that we can prioritize this for local workers, local or county workers, so that we do get the ancillary benefits of less traffic, better density, and an actual viable transit system. Obviously, biking is another solution, huge supporter of that. I've ridden many times to the plaza and struggled to find a place to park my bicycle. There's that spider-looking thing to the left, but I'm not sure exactly how to chain my bike up to it.
Good evening, my name is Jerry Burdenhow. The question I'm going to ask is one that I've been focusing on specifically for the last few years. How do you account for and address emissions from vehicle miles traveled by tourists coming to the city, including air travel? Would you support a requirement to account for those vehicle miles traveled in environmental reports for construction projects?
Glad I get to go again, so with my papers up here. I think that this is a really, really crucial issue. We as a small community are not going to be able to solve the climate crisis on our own, but the federal government really has kind of abdicated its duties in this area in a large way, pulling out of Paris climate, things like that. Here I think we need to take correct steps to address the reality of what our community does to our climate, how much emissions we produce, and how those are calculated. We look at tourism as a really, really kind of positive and not greenhouse emitting economy, right? It doesn't seem that way. It's mostly people walking around and sitting in tasting rooms and drinking. It doesn't appear that. It's not the same way as a coal-based economy where you see the smokestacks going up in the air. But the thing that we found, and this is something that Jerry really enlightened me on, is the fact that when you fly a plane, because it's higher up in the atmosphere, its greenhouse emissions have a lot worse effect than cars on the ground. We have people flying to this community from all over the country and indeed all over the world. And then we have wine that is shipped all over the country and all over the world. And we have a large effect on the greenhouse gas emissions that are produced. Currently, we look at our greenhouse gas emissions right when they come to our doorstep. We measure that short trip. We need to start looking at the impacts of increasing our tourist economy, increasing the number of hotels and wineries that we have here in kind of a holistic way, and really recognize what are the impacts that we're doing so that we can account for them, so that our community and our citizens can really make a decision, is this right for us? Is this right for the world? And decide with full knowledge. This is something that Jerry was really instrumental in doing, successfully sued our climate action plan because we didn't account for the reality, the holistic, the sum total of what our economy does in kind of a global sense. And when we have a situation where we have major ice caps melting in the Arctic, I just read about a lake up near the Arctic Circle that is literally bubbling because it's releasing methane. Methane is 27 times the greenhouse, or more than that, times the greenhouse gas that CO2 is. We are in a climate crisis. Most scientists predict that we're going to go over 2C, even if we reduce our greenhouse emissions to 0 right now. So it's crucial that we be realistic, that we be honest about what we're doing. Thank you.
I do think that this is going to be a question that our entire identity will be exploring until we figure out what the answer is. So I see two pieces of the question. One, the easier one to think about being, what do visitors do once they get here? And I think that starting a conversation at that level of how do we get people around town, and when they go up to the valley, how can we do this in a more effective way? You know, this goes back to the last question about transportation. It also is related to, one of my 3 big issues for this year is traffic and parking. And a lot of these solutions to sort of consolidating people who are already going in the same direction will also give us benefits of the traffic and parking that people are experiencing in their daily lives. So I liked James Cribb. He mentioned these bike share programs, which I think that Sonoma is a great place for something like that. I do think that there's additional steps we have to take to make it more comfortable to ride your bike in our city. The streets feel kind of narrow, especially with the parked cars. I always question why more Sonomans don't ride bikes, because it's very flat. So if there was ever a place where you could actually in the summertime get raining on a bike. So I think there's things that the city can do, relatively easy fixes, just to make it less intimidating for people to get on their bike. And I know tourists like to ride bikes because I live on Denmark Street, and I just sit there and watch flocks of them driving by. And sometimes a flock of segways, but usually flocks of bicycles. As far as how the tourists get here, this is going to be something that we have to keep talking about, and I think at least incorporating the numbers into what we consider, at least educating ourselves as to what the true effects are. It can help shape our conversation, going back to what our economy even looks like. And I do think that in many ways, regional approaches on these issues are very effective, but I think we need to look a little wider and get Napa and Napa Valley, and then even places like Carmel and Monterey, these other sort of well-known tourist destinations, to come together to talk about this, because I know that realistically nobody's going to be the first one that pulls the plug. So I think if we talk about it together to move in a way that people won't feel like they're the only one left out, then we'll have more effect.
Vehicle miles traveled, yes. I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, which governs a lot of development, is supposed to, by 2020, use vehicle miles traveled as its standard for evaluating projects, where now traffic is normally evaluated by what's called a level of service. So basically, how long do you wait at a traffic light versus what's the impact on the actual vehicle miles traveled of that project. So I think the issue there has been the state has not really come up with those standards yet, so hopefully they will, and we can use them. So I definitely think that's the way that things should be viewed, and then what we can do as a community is we can establish some standards when we're going to be heading into updating our general plan. And so, we could incentivize developers of any project to say, well, we have a standard that you need to meet in terms of vehicle miles traveled. There might be incentives if you can exceed that. And that might be achieved by, if you're a hotel, if you put, as Logan mentioned, these small electric shuttles, which probably will be in the next 10 to 20 years completely automated. But from what I've been reading, it seems like we're kind of right at the precipice of sort of slightly larger scale electric vehicles, something more than just a little small car, where some 8 to 10 passenger vans will be practical, and likewise for delivery vehicles, so that the people that are bringing goods and services into our town to support our tourist economy will, so we might do preferred parking for service vehicles that are electric as opposed to gas. So those are the things that we can do. The bigger issue of I've had these discussions with Tom Conlon, and I look forward to the day that we can actually accurately measure the impact of that bigger issue of, because 300 people get on a plane in New York, some of them come here, and some of them stay for a day, some of them stay for 2, some go to 4 wineries, some go to 3 restaurants. And we really need to understand what the true impact of that is. So I totally think that's something we hopefully will include in our standards going forward.
Thank you. If you've ever worked with me, this is how I usually look. I have a mind for a lot of information, and I think it's really important. One of the things I actually know about vehicle miles traveled, it's not the gas you use or the fuel. It's actually, I forgot. I've written it down. It's the miles traveled, not the gas that you use to travel. This is what I understand. So I heard someone earlier say, we need to start talking about a shuttle. Well, guess what? Here I am, S-H-U-T-T-L-E. And actually Sebastopol, they have, I think it's about 7,800 people. And they did focus groups of people who I will never get on a bus. That's not what I want to do. I need to get to Sam's Market. That's what I like in Sebastopol. So guess what? Now, there are nearly, the Sonoma County Transit has logged nearly 12,000 riders. Every month, it's 1,000 riders that ride their shuttle. And they're going to be the first town to have an electric vehicle, which I think is something that we should have. We're innovative. We were the first city to pass Climate Action 2020, and I think we need to stay in there. And so I have broached the subject with the county transit manager, and I think that's something that's very important. It's interesting that we look at all of this information, and I am very interested, as I said, with respect to miles traveled. And the city of Sonoma, we have people who come into the city of Sonoma. They need to be able to stay in one place. They don't have to travel around the city of Sonoma. If we had an electrical shuttle, I think someone said not small, not large. I don't know exactly what we'll need. But the other thing is, we have churches that sit empty, our parking lots. We could have a shuttle service that takes people to our churches that happen to have empty parking lots, or the high school. Or they can stay at the hotels, and our shuttle service can go to hotels and bring them into town, or to vineyards, or to the wineries, and into our valley. That's what a shuttle is all about. 4 other small cities in Sonoma County are now using shuttles. We need to get our fair share. Thanks.
So I would account for the vehicle miles traveled for tourists coming in, starting pretty much anywhere in the world. If they're leaving New York City or Hong Kong, I think that that's where we have to start when we're accounting for the vehicle miles traveled and the resulting greenhouse gas emissions from those travel. And then, how to address that? Well, recently there was a project going on that that included in its environmental impact report basically a dismissing of the greenhouse gases that would be caused by that project, basically just saying that they'll just travel around town and that's all we have to mitigate for. And I think if we started at these other places, wherever they started their trip from, and included that in the vehicle miles traveled for their trip here to the wine country, and then included that in mitigation for those projects, I think we'd be much further along with mitigating greenhouse gases. Now, what exactly those mitigation measures look like, I'm not entirely sure. There's some great ideas here tonight. Initially, I thought, oh, the light carbon credits, but I don't think that that's somehow that feels like a sham a little bit. But if we force some of these projects to do mitigation measures like in-town transportation, it actually takes the vehicle miles traveled that they're going to really account for their project, and when we say, okay, well, now you have to, or we would like you to invest in mitigation measures here locally or a little more regionally, I think we'd get a lot further along with actually curbing our greenhouse gas emissions. And then, I've already submitted, as part of an environmental impact report, questions regarding this. And I think that for construction projects, they should be required to account for mileage, basically starting from anywhere in the world, or wherever guests might come from or go to. And those impacts be mitigated in those projects. I think that's exactly what we need to do going forward. Thank you.
Chris stole my opening. Yeah, I would support VMT and all environmental reports. How would you account for and address vehicle miles traveled? We've talked about some solutions, and if we need to do some stuff, we can use the TOT or we can have the TID. How do we deal with tourism? Maybe we don't focus on tourism for a little while. Maybe we focus on the community. And people have been coming here for a long time, and they'll come here whether or not we have, TID or Visitors Bureau or massive hotels. They're going to keep coming up here. I heard economic diversity earlier, and this is something I've been talking about too. I've been also supporting a cannabis dispensary in town, which for people who are going to want to use that, that's cut down some miles traveled going out of town. People delivering it here, it's ridiculous. But I've easily be able to see the cannabis industry rivaling the wine industry the next 5 or 10 years out here. They'll bring us jobs, they'll bring us visitors. And I think that's a good thing, because what I've noticed, especially from running the last 4 years, is that there's a lot of pressure from the tourist industry on city council candidates, on the city council itself. And that's not what we need, man. We're a smart community. We made the best wine in the world when they told us we couldn't make wine. We will have the best cannabis in the world when we start shipping it around. And again, that's where economic growth is not a bad thing. We really need to think globally and promote that idea. I don't want to say propagandize it or advertise it, but share it. That carbon is keeping us back. One, it's becoming more expensive, and two, it's this moral conundrum. I walk. We use reusable bags. I try not to. We do all these efforts personally to exhaust ourselves to not contribute to this, and we could all just be growing. We could all be doing these amazing things together and working together, and not worrying about this. We just pressure the institutions to take care of this, and they have the power to do it, and we have the power to make them do it. But we need to focus on it and engage with it. I'm really glad Logan's running. I want to talk about housing real quick and reiterate his stuff. I was one of the youngest people running the first time, and now I'm not. You know, it is housing. It's finding regional partners to make some projects go and do some stuff. And, well, I'm actually out of time.
VMP is very new concept for me. And then we haven't used this technology for us to review any projects yet. And it is good, but it is also depends on the tourists. So I really don't want to repeat it again and again, and we rely on the tourists. Yes, all of the major income come from the tourists, from the wine industry and also tourists. However, eventually, we should rely on ourselves. We should little bit diversify our business sector and thinking 5 years later and 10 years later. And we should get stronger. Our traditional business is good. You know, we already got used to. We don't have any challenge. But however, we are Sonoma. We are Sonoma people. We have Sonoma's value. That is innovation, entrepreneurial spirit. So according to the statistics, our city labor force, 54% comes from service sector. Restaurants, tasting rooms, and tour guides, those kind of stuff. I really don't want to see our young generation, you know, serving the clients, and then with the basic minimum wages and anticipate big tips and what kind of business. I really don't want to see that. Our kids very smart, so I would like to little bit diversify our business sector and input some high tech. It doesn't matter, you know, input in a couple of the office and the studio, 5 people and 10 people, and that way will change the business style here. Once we got more money, financially strong, and then we have the ability to protect our time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be asking the 4th question. My name is Tom Conlon. I'm here tonight representing Coalition Partner Transition Sonoma Valley. How can the City Council make it easier for the public to track our progress on achieving our climate commitments?
My name is Jack Wagner. And I was not on General Hospital. That was the other Jack. He's not really Jack either, he's a General Hospital. Side issue. The best way we can track it is if we actually start doing the stuff we need to do and make some growth. Then we'll have some actual products to measure. You know, I'm on the subcommittees for waste, or I wasn't, I don't know if we take them out, but for waste minimization and for bikes and transportation. And the reason why I got into those subcommittees for my commission was because, again, I believe in climate change. I think we're all on board here. It's caused by carbon emissions, caused by greenhouse gases. We need to start doing something. You know, again, even if we reduce it to 0 today, we're still not good. And I understand the importance of showing progress to people so that they can really feel like the efforts are worth it. But I mean, we know they are. And the things that are going to help us locally are the same things that we need. Reducing traffic is going to help people who are just annoyed by traffic. They don't have to see the environmental impact of it. They just have to see that the traffic's reduced, and we'll know that by doing that, we're helping our environmental impact reduce. Housing is going to be something that people are going to want no matter what. You know, this is like, we didn't focus on what was important in society and what in our lives, and this is the byproduct of it. So the problem was here before we saw the problem. And it was the problem in how we organize our society and how we take care of people and how we engage with our environment and with the world around us. That's been the problem. And we need to start just doing these things that we can do. And I think we've got some good consensus up here on some of the local actions we can take. The transit, yes, let's do transit. Our job is to represent you and to direct staff. So we'll represent you on the priorities, and then we'll direct staff to give us options, and then we choose the option. So that's diplomacy and democracy. But having that focus is what's important, what we can decide up here. Green bike lanes, that advertises to everyone. We want to be a bike safety community, and it's important.
So, this question really makes me think about just kind of the general way that the city communicates with its residents. And I think that there's a real kind of breakdown in communication that just generally happens. And this happens throughout really society and large organizations. It's hard to kind of reach out and touch people, reach out and have people understand what you're doing and why it's important to them. I met people that I've known for a long time that have businesses on the plaza that had no idea that the cheese factory was being rebuilt and the size of that project and how it would impact their business. They were kind of caught off guard when they were contacted with the opportunity to appeal that project. I've met people that had no idea until the last meeting that rates were being increased on water and stuff like that. And so we need to really find ways that we can reach out and have our community understand what's happening inside of their community. We have a lot of great tools that are out there that are largely free ways to transmit information, right? We have YouTube and Facebook and all types of social media platforms that we can use. And right now, there's small kind of productions of this is the information that's going on, this is what we're going to talk about tonight, that'll be on Facebook, but a lot of people interact more with things like videos and pictures, and so we need to explore ways that we can get that information out there in a better way. We also need true accounting, because there's people that digest different levels of information. Some people just want a short little clip, hey, here's what's going on. Other people really want to dive into the data. And I think it's important that we provide both. And so using the city's website, I would love to see if we could create a section where there's really, really distinct data, where we have DMT calculations for the city and for new projects that are coming into it, where we can really, really garner the information. And the city's done well with the website so far, and I think that we need to continue to improve what's on there. People don't know what we're doing. I don't know how many people here knew tonight that the city had changed to LEDs in our streetlights. How many people knew that the city had switched from, general power to evergreen, which is 100% clean power? How many people knew that the city had changed their cars into mostly, started to purchase hybrids? So the city's been making steps, but people have no idea about it. So we need to increase our communication with the things that we're doing well, and we need to increase the data so that people can put pressure on us to do better. And I think that's the way that we get citizens engaged in this process, and having citizens engaged in this process is really how we're going to move forward. Because really, if there's anything that I've learned by getting engaged in government, is that the squeaky wheel truly does get the grease, and so we have to have opportunities for people to squeak as much as possible.
It's interesting. So for the last 2 years, I've been working on different environmental issues and with respect to the Transportation Authority and also the Waste Management Agency. And one of the things I got involved with was no recycling here for our cans and bottles any longer, which is unfortunate. Safeway, they lied and said that they were recycling. They had a picture on their window that said recycling here, so guess what? We brought a truckload of cans and bottles. They couldn't do it, and we thought that was pretty funny. I was called by the Grocers Association, and they told me to stand down, don't make trouble for the stores. So those are some of the things that are going on out there, and I wanted to let you know that we have an action plan for our projects, and as Logan said, we have, I think possibly past about 80% of our street lights are now LED, which is wonderful. Of course, we have cash for grass. As I walk the streets and the precincts, I see a lot of lawns are gone, which I think people are realizing that's what they have to do. The other thing, of course, is the landscaping. I think that we're committed to cutting some trees, and I think the Ecology Center is part of that. I think then the county has a program that they actually want to cut, I think, 10,000 trees because they're dead. The other issue is, of course, updating zip cars. That's some of the information that's in here, and it is unfortunate, and I'm sorry. You know, we're getting much better with our website because we really do believe letting people know what the city of Sonoma is doing. And I always include our valley because so much of our support includes the valley, which I think is very important. There are different projects that are going to be going on. I wanted to let you know that you've seen some people in the news lately, electric cars, hybrid cars. You can go to cleanvehiclerebateproject.org and take a look at some of the rebates that are here for electric cars. That's very, very important, of course, to get those off, your gas vehicles off the road. And I told my husband our next car will be an electrical vehicle, and he proclaimed over his dead body. So I don't know. We're going to kill him. Down with your husband. But I just thank you so much for inviting us here. You know, this is something that was learned. I had to learn about the environmental issues, and I'm working very hard to try to find that out and the things that you're very, very interested in. So thank you so much for your time.
So it would be really hard to make it easy, I think. I work in Valley Lumen Water District, and we work very hard to help people conserve the water. Sometimes it's like yelling in the mud. But when you connect it to dollars or you get it on websites and so on, it can make it easier for people. I think one way that the city could possibly help people track or make it easy for them to track their climate commitments might be an app on their phone or something like that. It certainly works well with consumption of water. But again, it's getting people to sign up for stuff like that that I think is the real challenge. How do you market that to people? How do you make it really important that they actually track or actually are honest with what their real consumption levels are? I think that will really come down to marketing and us really kind of trying to wake people up that this is really important. This is urgent. But I think ultimately it will come down to just finding ways that it's easy for people who don't have to think about it, but they get an alert, oh, you surpassed what you were supposed to consume this week or this month or this year, whatever it might be. And I don't know that a city council can do something like that, but I think it's certainly something that we could try to do. If there are parallels with other consumables like electricity or water, I think it could be possible. I'm just not sure how to make that connection. I know PG&E has done a nice job helping people track their electric and gas usage, and maybe the city can partner with an entity like that to help people along that way. But as far as like people being honest about what they're driving or how they're getting around town, I'm not entirely sure. But I certainly would be willing to try, and again, I think it would come down to marketing. The city of Sonoma, in all the years I worked on the City Services and Environment Commission, it was always so hard to get people to hear about the conservation efforts the city was trying to do, the marketing efforts the city was trying to do, or even the money the city was trying to give away. Sometimes it was hard for people to pay attention to that, but it's certainly worth doing.
I agree that tracking progress is intimately connected with our ability to communicate with the community, because not only does that let you all know that we are in fact doing good things, but it also, this whole cultural shift that needs to happen, it's easier to get everybody involved if they think the city is going along with them. And there is still work to do. However, you should have seen the website 3 years ago. And we didn't even have a Facebook page back then. But now we're just trying to figure out how to use the Facebook page. But communication tools were a huge piece of what I worked on when I was mayor back in 2017. We realized that we were doing a very poor job of telling our community what we were doing. And the theme for the last couple of years has been kind of re-examining what we're doing as a city and how we are operating and how we can, prepare ourselves to exist in the modern world as it is today, the increasingly complex world. And this has spanned many departments. The current department that's in focus is our planning department. And I'm very encouraged by a lot of the sort of just structural improvements that are being made, even just how we structure the staff within the department that will allow us to spend more time spending on other things. Our planning director is also our community development director, but we don't really get to hear about that side a lot because we've been dealing so much on the planning side. But as far as tracking progress, specific measurable goals are a necessity with this. And I explained earlier about the Community Service Environment Commission, sort of looking at an annual list of things that they can start working on. And even beyond that, as a city, I think we need to continue to focus on goals that we can do in a year, whether it's focusing on our waste stream, or starting small with a usable public transportation system. And then this is the way that you have to do bigger goals. Like, I want to expand our recycled water infrastructure, which is going to be a bit expensive, but if we start planning it, we are more likely to be eligible for matching grant funds and things like that. So we just need to be organized, have goals. We have the Community Service Environment Commission, but there's also so many great resources out there, so many groups that are represented in this room, that the city could really rely on as we put these goals together. So I think we can all work together.
Good question. Question said, how can the city council make it easy for the public to track? Easier is very important. Here I have the 3 points to share with you. First, right now, we have too much information. Overwhelming. We don't know what's going on. If you see the one thing, maybe you have the 3 different reports. They tell you the 3 different stories. Nobody knows. So here it's very important. Just make it easy. How to explain, how to interpret. So I would suggest our city council should assign a specific data analyst dedicated for environment, data collection and analysis, and try to use 4 grade language, tell us what it is. If you use a bunch of the technical terms, nobody knows. That is nonsense. Number 2, also, it's kind of easy to understand how to track communication. I support those kind of old school tradition. So that each council member should meet in the local nonprofit organization meetings, monthly meetings. I will not ask them to come each meeting, 1 quarter and half year. Sit down and discuss, and then in this way we can get a better understanding, and then we can track what's going on. Third one is how to track. Each council member should assign homework for yourself. When you're in year 1, and then you go over, look at, review it. Have you already achieved your goal yet? How to improve? And when the year 4, if you haven't achieved, you cannot rerun because you haven't fulfilled your promise. Thank you so much.
I started my work life as a teacher at high school, and then moved on to got my advanced degree. It was in instructional system design, and then I focused for a number of years on the education of adults and the training and development of adults. And when I saw this question, I kind of thought about this really as an education problem. And then I kind of went to what I think is a really great model that I think certainly this group would relate to, is what the Ecology Center has done with their Enviro Leaders program. I'm familiar with that. And one thing I've learned in my 13 years in public service on design review and historic preservation and on planning is we have an active and engaged community. Hence all of you here tonight. And it made me think that, well, maybe what the city should do is have an adult environmental leaders program that the council can sponsor. And, because, it's been mentioned several, it's like, there is some information on the website. It probably could be better. It needs to be upgraded. And who knows what's going on? Who knows the exact data? And maybe if you looked at the sort of key areas about climate change and things in the environment and just our carbon footprint that we're looking at, I think about wearing my little Fitbit here, and I've got my dashboard, and and I can see at the high level how many steps I've taken, and then I can click and I can go deeper and see hour by hour how I did. And if we kind of maybe invited some of you out there to become our sort of city environment leaders for these issues once we've, with our goals, and maybe that would be a good way to kind of kickstart this and invite, maybe it would be at once a month at the council meeting, there would be a person talking about progress in transportation. The next month might talk about new projects related to building, and then someone talking about the waste stream. So I think getting the community more involved is probably in the short term our best bet to create that, because I know there's the passion for it, or you guys wouldn't be here tonight.
All right, thanks to everybody who's again come tonight. Thanks again to the candidates. In a moment, they'll have the opportunity to give a brief closing statement. Before we do that, I have a couple of brief announcements from some of our partner groups. So the Earth Care Committee would like to invite you to join in supporting the 21 youth plaintiffs filing the landmark federal climate lawsuit for a safe and healthy future. That trial begins October 29th in U.S. District Court in Eugene, Oregon. They have some flyers in the back that have a little list of things you can do at the bottom to support those youth in that trial. Second, the Sonoma Developmental Center will close at the end of this year. Please help preserve that 1,000-acre jewel at the heart of the Sonoma Valley by adding your voice to those petitioning Governor Brown for progress on transitional governance, state funding, and permanent preservation of open spaces. Again, there's these cards back that give you information on how you can get involved and add your name to that petition to the governor. Third, join the Praxis Peace Institute on October 22nd. We have flyers at the back on that as well. You can see Georgia, who's up here at the front. October 22nd at 7:15 at the Sonoma Community Center. Public banking expert Ellen Brown and political economist and historian Gar Alperovitz. The title of their talk is Changing the System, California's Strategic Role in National Systemic Change. Finally, thanks again to all of you for coming. We do have a sign-up sheet as well in the back with Joy and Maurice if you'd like to get added to the Sonoma Valley Climate Coalition mailing list. And with that, we have final closing statements, and you're welcome to stick around afterwards and talk with candidates more one-on-one. Thank you again.
Student council president, I won, and one of the first things I did, because I'd also been a co-founder of our environmental concern committee, those things were in vogue. along the way, as I've talked about, to improve the quality of life here. I know really fundamentally reducing our carbon footprint is essential, and I hope I can help our community do that. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's kind of honor for me, and also it's a learning experience. I don't know democracy. You guys know. It's first time to try. I'm the first generation immigrant American. So I appreciate this opportunity. Today I'm standing here, I already won this race. That is from my body. Yeah. But however, I'm willing to continue my service to our community because I love Sonoma. Sonoma is kind of small and precious. We know in history, our ancestors sacrificed, made a huge sacrifice for us. So we are lucky, we are blessed to live here and work here. We have an obligation. Once we pass it over to our younger generation, we want to make sure Sonoma is more beautiful, healthy, and strong. Economically structured. Thank you so much.
When I first ran for City Council in 2014, one of my driving inspirations was I felt that local government was just underrated. Not a lot of people were really talking about it as much, but local government makes the decisions that affect our everyday lives. But now that I've been on the council for 4 years, I have realized how essential local government is to not only the future of our city, but really the future of our country and even our world. And it is up to cities to lead the way in addressing climate change because cities are the ones that are creating the biggest impact. And it's going to have to be cities leading the way in social justice issues like finding housing for our workforce. So the theme of my next 4 years, if you'll have me, is going to be all about the future. Some of that means creating opportunities for future generations to live here in Sonoma. And part of that is looking further to the future so that future generations will be able to enjoy a Sonoma that they will love as much as we do today. And so the main issues that I'm talking about today, which I would love to talk about more after this, are housing, traffic and parking, and our general plan update, which I think is going to bring a lot of opportunities to talk about our future and what we need to do to preserve it for future generations. And I'll be hanging out in the back afterwards. I have signs if you would like one, and I would like to ask for your support this November.
So again, my name is Logan Harvey, and I'd like to thank the Climate Coalition and Healthcare Committee for putting this on tonight again. I was born and raised in this community. So I graduated in 2005 from Snow Valley High School. This is a community I really care deeply and passionately about. I really do feel that, as Rachel said, that local governments are really where it happens. We see all these issues of economic injustice, of environmental decline, of healthcare issues, all these things, and these are problems that we can address right here in our local communities. We can address economic injustice by providing housing for our teachers, for our workforce. We can address environmental issues by also providing housing for our teachers and our workforce. Developing regional climate programs and regional transit programs that provide good quality, low cost, and accessible transit for everybody in our community, for our seniors and our young people as well. I really think that if we elect 3 new leaders to City Council that have housing, that have environment in the forefront of their minds, we can really be successful in creating opportunities for the next generation of Sonomans. And I'd really like to call on each of you to get more engaged with our government and support these projects as we go through them. Whoever's on council, I certainly hope that I'm among them. But please, get engaged, learn what's going on in your community, and learn how you can support the efforts that are really going to create a brighter, better future for Sonoma. Thank you.
See if I can stand up straight and get this mic. I want Sonoma to be the greenest small town in the country, in the world, but in order to do that, we've got to actually become green. We need to address housing, we need to address traffic, and we need to hold the tourist industry accountable for its effects on our community and our environment. I'm on the Community Services and Environmental Commission. You can catch me on October 10th in action with my fellow commissioners. I am committed to this town. I was born and raised in Sonoma. I ran the last 2 elections. I got close last time. I only need to continue to grow, to get in there. And, we have other great candidates up here. I vote for any of these candidates for president in 2020. Not even amend the Constitution to let Logan and Jack run this next election. We've got to change leadership in our town, in our state, in our country. I don't want to get too political. I like the candidates that are going up there now. 30 seconds, that's a long time. I want to thank the Climate Coalition and the First Congregational Church for having this. This was an awesome event. I look forward to the other forums where we can all debate and discuss and hopefully agree on a solid plan for the future of this town. And God bless them.
Again, thank you for putting this on. This was a really wonderful event. Thanks to all the candidates for showing up. Put on a good show tonight, too. This has been first on my mind for a long time. In the many years that I served on the City Services and Environment Commission, when I first started, I didn't know much about environmental impacts. And over the time I spent there, my mind was really expanded. And I chose to stop working all over the Bay Area, come back and work closer to home, riding my bicycle to work rather than sitting in traffic all the time. And I chose to throw my heart into my community. With my 2 young girls, climate change is even more on my mind. And I do everything we can to make sure that the world that my children inherit, our children inherit, is a place that they would want to live. It's very, very serious. If elected as City Council, it will be a priority for me. It will be on the agenda. It will be something that we are taking action on. It will not be on the back burner. I ask for your vote in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for inviting all of us, Sonoma Valley Climate Coalition. I really appreciate that. You've heard from all of us, some of us with new ideas, some of us with evolving ideas. I've always been a consummate volunteer. I've served as president of 3 different organizations here in the city of Sonoma. You see my face everywhere. That's what I hear when I walk precincts and people talk to me. I've seen you. You were at, I don't know, Chicken Ranch or something. But I left that. I left my role some years ago as volunteer and actually worked for legislators. And one that would stand out to you would be Alan Cranston. I worked for him for many years. I am also on the League of California Cities Environmental Policy Committee, which brings up a lot of policy issues that you've discussed here, but at another level. If we lived in San Francisco and had $30 million, we'd be able to build housing for just teachers, but we don't. If you want to help me with the shuttle service for our city, to help with the strategic planning of the Vintage House, I encourage you to contact Madoline for sonoma@gmail.com for a focus group for our shuttle service. Thank you so much for this evening, and I'm really appreciative of you inviting us here. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you again, everyone, and please vote in November. Remind your friends and your family, no matter where they live in the United States, to vote in November. Thank you.